The situation on the ground is the worst that I've seen in 20 years. We've got 11 million people displaced. This is the world's largest hunger crisis.
Is this complicated by UN politics at all?
I sat with mothers and their daughters becoming vulnerable of sexual violence, of being unable to access basic medical care.
I just want to graduates, doctors, psychologists who were absolutely determined that their future was within Sudan and that they wanted to be part of rebuilding their country.
When schools are closed, it'll be the girls' schools that close first. Education is sometimes discarded as not a life-saving intervention.
Well,
but actually,
I would disagree with that.
They need the world's attention.
You might want to capture some of this. I don't know if
We're rolling, don't worry.
Okay.
We did our allocations announcement,
Yeah.
I think it was about 3 weeks ago, and there was a whole discussion about whether just taking the bilateral number for Africa and comparing it with the bilateral number for Africa previously was an indicator, or how reliable an indicator of our commitment to Africa that should be. My point was not a very reliable one, because we're spending more obviously through the multilateral system and have deliberately picked funds that specifically target sub-Saharan Africa.
Yep.
So like African Development Bank, IDA, that stuff. There's been a bit of back and forth about that. So
Good.
I'm glad you missed it though, because it was huge in my life.
Well, I followed the announcement of the allocations, obviously,
Right.
and we're looking forward to seeing some of the details at the country level come out and so on. And Sudan will be an important one.
Sudan's protected completely.
That's right. So we're looking forward to seeing what that translates into as a number.
It'll be the same.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
There's no surprises.
That's really good.
When we say protected, it means protected. One of the places that we've both been quite recently, where we've seen this for ourselves, is Sudan. Yeah. I know you're just back.
Yes.
From Sudan yourself.
Yeah.
And do you want to just tell me kind of where you went and what you were able to see and what you made of it?
So I was there. I came back last month. I've been going to Sudan for more than 20 years.
Right.
And I was most recently there in 2022 as a Foreign Office official, in fact, where I met the two generals who are now slugging it out. The situation on the ground is the worst that I've seen in 20 years. The humanitarian impact is enormous. 20 years ago, the conflict was largely confined to the Darfur area. It was a terrible conflict. Now it's spilled out across the country. We've got 11 million people displaced still. Half of Sudan's children have lost between 15 and 18 months of schooling. This is the world's largest hunger crisis. So it's spilled right across the country. The situation is desperately fragile. And my colleagues on the ground are living it too, right? So I've got 650 odd colleagues working on all sides of the conflict. They are living the crisis. Their families are displaced, 70% more displaced. Many of them, their families are overseas. But they're on the ground and working on all sides of the conflict. So it is possible to make a difference. And on this visit, we went from Port Sudan through River Nile State all the way to Khartoum. And Khartoum is a place that I've been going to for 20 years. And we visited clinics and schools and hospitals and displacement camps and so on. And it was salutary, depressing, but also inspiring to see the resilience of people and to encounter their hope, and to also spend time with my colleagues and other partners to see what we can actually do, even in a desperately fragile situation like Sudan.
I don't know if you found this, but when I was there, I went to Ardre because that was the closest we could get at the time. And some of the women that I was speaking to, what struck me was just how well educated they were. I was talking to graduates, doctors, psychologists who were absolutely determined that their future was within Sudan and that they wanted to be part of rebuilding their country at some point. It's shocking and saddening and just makes you feel so desperate is that space for them to be able to take that leadership and to be able to build the future that they want for themselves and their children feels no closer now than it has done for the last 3 years. And I think that I do wonder how the international community, when we are looking at crises in DRC, in Lebanon, in
Yes.
Gaza, how we get more focus on what's happening in Sudan. Because I think unless we get that from the public, from media, within politics, then really that attention, it's just never going to be sufficient to put the pressure on the warring parties to make them, and those that support them,
absolutely,
to change what is happening on the ground.
So we know in most conflicts, women and girls are on the receiving end. They're often abused, suffer sexual violence. When food is scarce, they may well come off second best when families are making choices. When schools are closed, it'll be the girls' schools that close first. So we know that women and girls are very, very vulnerable in conflicts, and particularly young children, adolescent girls. And we see that in Sudan. So on my travels there, I sat with mothers and their daughters in displacement camps, in schools, in clinics, and their stories are horrific. Of losing their male relatives, fathers, sons, of becoming vulnerable, of sexual violence, of being unable to access basic medical care. So terrible, terrible stories. But also, again, stories of hope and resilience. I went to a school where I sat with a group of girls, and actually I've never met a group of girls that were brighter about their future. A surprising number of young Sudanese girls that I met want to be pilots. They want to fly planes.
Fantastic.
And I can't figure out why, but they have hope.
Someone's inspired them.
Someone's inspired them, but they have hope. But life is really tough. Needs are great for food, for shelter, for access to healthcare. But there's a degree of resilience there, and of course it's Sudanese organisations that are at the front end of that, the emergency rooms and other community groups.
Are you working with the
We
emergency
are,
response
absolutely.
rooms? Great.
We do a lot of work with the emergency rooms, and again, one of the sites that I visited was a community kitchen that we support in one of the suburbs of Khartoum, where it's a group of women who've come together who are cooking for the community. Anybody can walk through the door, access a meal. I met a refugee woman who had come there from El Fasher with her children, and she'd settled in this neighbourhood because she had some distant relatives. But she spoke of the openness of the community to receiving her, the fact that she could come to this community kitchen every day and be guaranteed a meal a day for herself and for her children, but also the friendship that came from being in that space, being able to make connections, so that she and her children could try and navigate this incredible and dramatic shift in their lives, and also find some solace from the violence and trauma that they'd experienced.
So the emergency response rooms, they came to visit London as well.
Yes, they did.
To explain how they work and the benefits to all of us, really, for working with them. Yeah. And it was really encouraging to hear that Save the Children is doing just that. It's something that I think many people have known for some time, but I think we need to put more emphasis on, is that working with local organisations has such a benefit, not just that they can reach communities that otherwise are difficult to connect with.
That's right.
But actually you're building leadership, and you're building a strong network, and you're building a capability there, which outlasts anything that you're able to do.
So for Save the Children, that commitment to being local is deep in our DNA. So we've been in Sudan for more than 40 years. I've got 650 colleagues. There's a handful of international staff in them. They're local. So I was there with Gavi for the first few days of the visit. And actually, the progress that we've made on vaccinations is remarkable and speaks to that localization. So 2 years into the conflict, vaccination rates for a basic package of vaccines for Sudan's children fell from 94% to 48%.
Goodness, okay.
And in a space of a year, Save the Children, working with 2 other NGO partners, has been able to lift that to 83%. So we've been able to do that because our staff are local. Yes. They're embedded on the ground. They've been able to negotiate the operating space. And because of their local relationships, we've been able to stand up the latent potential of the public sector. So to get health workers back into clinics, provide them a motorbike so they can get to the tree where they need to do the vaccinations, provide the consumables. But then that's been possible because we've had Gavi's backing.
Yes.
and that's a multi-year commitment. So it's not short-term humanitarian funding, but actually the ability to take a multi-year perspective to address the problem. And I think when you've got, a protracted crisis, for example, in Sudan, we're about to mark the 3 years of the conflict, but we see similar situations elsewhere. You've got to find that blend of development finance that is ready to operate in a fragile state setting, working with locally embedded organizations and local partnerships that are there for the long term.
I
and if you do
that,
you can still create impact.
Yes.
For example, in vaccinations, even in the most difficult circumstances.
I think that's right. I was in DRC a couple of weeks ago, and we were having exactly this conversation, and they're spending so much more of their money now on their health provision, because they recognise that, if you're chasing all the time, just trying to do humanitarian interventions without strengthening systems as well, you're never going to succeed. And I think this is sort of widely accepted now, but it's how we actually make that happen in practice.
That's right.
But I think sometimes the division that we have between what humanitarian intervention is and what development spending is, it's false, and we need to somehow bridge that divide.
We see that in our work, and I think focusing on human capital is a key element in this.
Yes.
So the motivation for humanitarian assistance is save lives. But actually, if you're in a conflict situation which may run for years, do you just discard generations and discard the hope? I don't think so. So you've got to find ways of doing particularly education and health work that enables young people to envisage a future, to have a degree of hope. And then alongside that, you've got to have the diplomatic work to try and address and solve conflicts.
Yes.
But you've got to invest in people so that there is a future. So we see that in our work in vaccinations. We also see that in our work in education. In many settings, education is sometimes discarded as not a life-saving intervention.
Well,
but actually,
I would disagree with that.
Yeah, well,
especially for girls.
Yeah, we feel really strongly about this. We think this is a critical intervention, both because it invests in the future, but also it provides psychological support. It provides a space for particularly girls, but also boys, to process some of the trauma that they experience. It provides a space where they can play and be normal. Children just want to be children.
Yes.
Provides a space where they can hope. In lots of school settings, it provides a square meal, right, at a time when nutrition will come under pressure. It creates jobs.
Yes.
The people who work in the schools tend to be women.
Yes.
And the other thing it does is it provides childcare. Again, I saw it in Sudan, right? A mother able to go work, doing really, eking out a pittance to provide something for her family, but able to do it because her daughter and her son was in school.
Yes.
And that provided respite. So I think if you think about education holistically, and particularly in a protracted crisis, actually we really believe it to be a vital intervention, particularly for the impact it has for women and girls.
Yes, no, I completely agree. It's so good to hear that Save the Children is doing this. Can you just tell me a little bit about your workers who are there in Sudan? And I know that many have come under threat, and sadly some have been killed and lost their lives. But the psychological impact on them, and how it's affecting your team.
Yeah, so we've got 650 odd colleagues in Sudan working on all sides of the conflict. We've been there 40 years. They're very embedded in Sudanese society. They're Sudanese. They speak the languages. They reflect the ethnic diversity of the country. But of course, they not only work for us to respond to this crisis, they live the crisis. And so, as I said earlier, 70% of them have been displaced. They're out of their homes. They're in temporary accommodation. Many of those who used to live in Khartoum and Omdurman, just across the Nile, which is the twin city with Khartoum, have been are now in Port Sudan. For many of our staff, their families have become refugees. So they've got families in Egypt, in Uganda, in Kenya, in the UAE, in Ethiopia. They are worried about their families and about the future of their children who are overseas and access to education. But they're back in Sudan and they're working, men and women, working for Save the Children, doctors, teachers, others, because they believe that they need to be at the sharp end to create a future for their country. They're committed to the future of their country. They're desperate to see stability. They're desperate to get back to their homes. They're desperate to bring their families who are overseas back.
I think one of the things that we could do is to try and make clearer for people the connection between what is happening in Sudan, what's happening in the Gulf, what's happening in the Horn.
I agree.
The wider geopolitics of this, I don't think get
right.
sufficient understanding and appreciation.
That's right.
We're both in Washington next week.
Yeah.
This week.
Tomorrow.
At the World Bank. And I think that one of the things that we might be able to do while we're there and having our conversations with ministers and others from around the world is just to try and make this point.
Absolutely.
About, yes, clearly all eyes are currently on Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, but actually there is a wider political piece to this that if we all understand, we may have a little bit more success in tackling.
I think I completely agree, Jenny, and we need to find the mechanisms that enable sustained attention. So, the Berlin conference is a good initiative. We'll do some work in the World Bank when you and I are there this week. I think the UK's initiative around creating a coalition for atrocities prevention is a really welcome initiative by bringing countries together that are able to hold to account the perpetrators of the atrocities that are being committed in Sudan. We've also been championing the Children in Armed Conflict agenda, which is a framework that sits under the UN Security Council. There is a place where we can set aside our geopolitical differences. Surely it's got to be about the harms of conflict for children.
Yes, of course.
And I think that for us is one reason why this Children in Armed Conflict agenda matters so much, because at a time of great political disagreement, we've got to be able to focus on children and set aside our differences and say, okay, what's the worst that these children are living through? How can we place some boundaries on that? And how can we do right by them?
Yes.
They are our future.
Yes.
And I think that message is something that we find cuts through, both with publics and even in a fractured geopolitical space.
Yes. Well, I look forward to working together with you on that, because in a context where there is so little hope, if we can at least come together in that way, then I think we'll have achieved something as we work towards a negotiated settlement and the peaceful future that people of Sudan need. That's what we all want to see. It's so good to see you.
It's lovely to see you, Jenny, and we welcome the UK's leadership on this, both in co-hosting the Berlin conference, the work you guys are doing around the coalition on the prevention of atrocities, in the humanitarian space. We'd love to collaborate more on this Children in Armed Conflict agenda, but I think civil society and government, and indeed with our partners, we all need to work together to address this appalling conflict that's playing out, and we're now entering the 4th year.
Yes.
So thank you.
No, thank you too.